Y nos da mucho gusto iniciar una conferencia el día de hoy del doctor Frank Loge, que nos visita de la Universidad de California, Davis, y queremos dar también el agradecimiento a FEMSA, que nos está apoyando con este esfuerzo de tener aquí al doctor, y al grupo de investigación en ciencias y tecnología del agua. El doctor Frank, ahorita voy a hablar en inglés, bueno, ya el doctor Ramón les va a seguir dando algunas palabras sobre el doctor Frank, y antes de eso quiero decir que el doctor Frank va a estar con nosotros próximamente como profesor distinguido del Tecnológico de Monterrey, así que lo más seguro es que lo vamos a ver en los próximos años aquí en el TEC, colaborando en proyectos de investigación y servicio, consultoría, etc. Bueno, quiero ceder la palabra al doctor Ramón González.
First, I want to thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to be here today and to have the opportunity to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Frank Loge. Dr. Loge is the director of the Center for Water Energy Efficiency at the University of California in Davis. He is also professor of the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. He has worked on the research and development of technologies and policies that advance the knowledge in the water energy nexus. In addition, he has studied the relationship between engineered natural systems and human and environmental health, giving emphasis on water and energy efficiency in urban and agricultural systems. As a final note, he is also a great person, and we are grateful for his presence among us today. Without further ado, please join me welcoming Dr. Frank Loge.
Thank you. So I'll stand over here so I don't interfere with the microphone. I speak very little English, so very little Spanish, so I'm going to speak in English. But thank you all for coming today. Did anyone come to the event yesterday? No, good, okay. 1, 2, 3, okay. So there's a few slides that are similar, but all the rest I try to make different. I am going to be working down here on a regular basis for roughly the next 3 years with Jorgen and Ramon. And I thought I would use this opportunity to share with you some of the work we've been doing up in California and some of the elements of these projects we hope to bring down to Monterrey and the larger regions within Mexico. And in part, we're looking for a few good graduate students to work on these projects. So it's a marketing effort as well as an educational effort. So if at any point you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or just yell out. So I'm going to kind of step through 3 projects let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 projects today. So it's more of an overview than diving deep into one project. So the first project I'd like to talk about is a project that we've been involved with for several years that's looking at quantifying ultimately the amount of energy that's embedded within water. And then once you understand that, you can begin to understand the energy savings through water conservation. And so I'm going to develop that concept in the next few slides. So shown here on the left-hand panel are these boxes here are the different elements that are associated with providing potable water or drinking water to an end user, like a house, apartment, or an industry. And then the boxes shown here, going this way, are the different elements that are associated with treating wastewater before it's discharged into the environment. So each one of these boxes has energy that's used as part of that process. So if you think about adding up all the energy in these boxes to then represent the amount of energy that's embedded or associated with that water that is provided to the end user, you can begin to understand then if the end user saves water, then they also will save electricity or natural gas, and you can begin to quantify how much they save. So there's two primary ways to calculate energy intensity, so I'm going to show you two ways now. So the first way is, this is the state of California, and the first way is to develop regional estimates. So this right here is a region within California. It's called the North Coast region. And someone went through about 5 years ago, and I'm not going to explain the methodology, but they developed the energy intensity of that water. The value shown here in bold is the sum of the energy that's put in to make drinking water and the energy that's put in to make or to treat wastewater. The parenthetical value down here is the energy that's used just to make drinking water or potable water. So that's one way, and so it's a static value. It doesn't change with time. It's just a value, and then if you live within this particular region, in concept, then if you roll out a program that says replaces toilets and shower heads, you could figure out how much energy you save through saving water by replacing those fixtures within a house or a residence. The other way, and throughout these slides, don't worry too much about the text. I'm just going to say what the text says in words, so focus more on the images. So the other way to do this is by going to the water utility itself or the wastewater utility and obtaining actual information from the water utility or the wastewater utility. So we recently performed a study with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. It provides water and power to roughly 23 million people in Southern California. And we quantified, it's hard to see, but we quantified, this is the service territory, all the colored area. And we quantified the energy intensity within the service territory. Yellow is low and red is high. And so the takeaway message here is that within a water utility, there's certain areas that use a lot of electricity or natural gas, and there's areas that use very little to none. So this is a much more accurate number than the regional estimates, and this number also can change with time. You can update the numbers monthly, yearly, on whatever basis you'd like to do. We also did a similar study with the wastewater system, which I'm not going to show you, but it produced a similar kind of graphic that represented the energy that's associated with wastewater conveyance, treatment, and disposal. The other element, so that's all within the utility. So it'd be like the city of Monterrey, that would be all the energy within the city. There's also energy that's expended to get the water into the city, and this is generally associated with surface water. So if you have to transport water long distances into your city, there's energy associated with that. So Los Angeles also gets, they have some groundwater pumps that they pump locally, but they also get their water from 3 different sources: the State Water Project, the Los Angeles Aqueduct, and the Colorado River. So we also incorporated in the energy from these outside sources to include in our estimates of the energy intensity of the water system itself, which I just showed you in the previous slide. So what we did next, and again, don't focus on the words, I'll describe this, just focus on the graphic. So then what we did is, we now have basically 6 different estimates of energy intensity. So this value right here is the energy intensity within the service territory of just their water system, the drinking water system. This right here, the red is wastewater, the blue is water, and the blue is the same as that. This right here is the energy intensity associated with just their service territory for both their water and wastewater. And then this value here is the energy intensity of their potable water system, including the energy in their water utility, and then geographically, a larger scale, the energy that's expended to get water into their service territory. Same idea here, water and wastewater, and then these are the regional estimates that I showed you in the first slide. So what we did is we took these different numbers and we then used them to estimate the energy that was saved through their different water conservation programs that the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power has in place, and we compared them to their energy efficiency programs run from their energy program, or from their energy group. So shown in blue, these words here, the words again are not important. What's important to note is these words that correspond to the blue bars, Those words are different types of water conservation programs that the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power has put into place over the years. So as an example, this says high efficiency washers, this says high efficiency toilets, as an example. All the words that correspond to the red bars are energy efficiency programs that they put into place to save energy. So those programs include things like replacing incandescent light bulbs with LED light bulbs, or replacing low efficiency water heaters with high efficiency water heaters. So they're programs that specifically targeted technologies that save energy, not water. And so what we've done here is we've used the energy intensity estimates to translate the water saved through these different programs into the corresponding energy that was saved through saving water. So all these bars are in reference to dollars per kilowatt hour. And so we're going to do this now 6 times, and as this happens, all these names will stay the same, but the bars will change. So the first estimate of energy intensity we're using is just the energy intensity of the potable water system within Los Angeles Department of Water and Power service territory. And you end up with a plot like this. So the cost to save a kilowatt hour through water programs is not very competitive to the cost associated with saving water through energy efficiency programs. So compare the blue bars to the red bars are smaller. So from a business standpoint, if you look at it just through this lens, it makes a lot more sense to spend energy efficiency money on energy efficiency programs, not water efficiency programs. But now as you expand your lens and you now look at the second way to calculate energy intensity, the blue bars get smaller. And I'll just click through this and you can watch it like an old-time movie. But as we expand the geographic scale, the blue bars shrink. And so when you look, as you expand the geographic scale, at some point, investing energy efficiency money into the water sector to save water is a very cost-effective way at saving electricity. So the end kind of take-home message here is the water sector or a water utility and an energy utility generally are different entities, and they have different programs. So the energy utility is interested in providing all of you electricity and natural gas, and they're interested in helping you save energy and natural gas. The water sector does something similar to water. But now what we're talking about is having the energy utility take some of their money and invest it in the water sector. And that's a fairly new idea, and we've been trying to help advance that idea in California. So I cut out one slide. So let's expand this idea a little bit in terms of having an energy utility invest in a water sector. So I'm going to look at a different city now. So this is the city of Otay, and Tijuana is located right here. This is the border between Mexico and California. And the city of Otay is located here, and their geographic area is shown in color. Now these colors correspond to the energy intensity for different regions within the city of Otay. So it's a very similar graphic to the one I showed you for Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. The city of Otay was interested in rolling out a rebate program, which I'll talk about in a second. But before I do that, the city of Otay is located right down here. Here's the border with Mexico. And the water is transported down through here and then through a network all the way down to here. The water, it passes through 3 energy utilities. So it passes through Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. The water passes through 3 water utilities, or 4 water utilities. It passes through the state California Aqueduct, Metropolitan Water District, San Diego County Water Authority, and then it passes into the city of Otay. So the idea here, so historically, if Otay wanted to roll out a water conservation program, they would pay the full amount for that water conservation program. But the idea that we're trying to develop here is that there's multiple stakeholders. There's 3 energy utilities and there's 4 water utilities, all of whom benefit by saving water down in Otay. So with this idea of energy intensity and being able to translate energy savings, water savings into energy savings, what we were able to show is that these different agencies should pay these amounts of money to then fully fund the cost of what we call a direct install program. And that program is where a contractor comes into a commercial or industrial or a residential house and will install things. So this was a direct install program for residential houses. They come in and they will install faucets, shower heads, and clothes washers in this case. The total cost of this program to Otay is roughly $440,000. So historically, that's what Otay would have to pay. And what the concept we were trying to develop is that each one of these stakeholders has a different benefit that they're going to receive by saving water down here in Otay. And so this is the breakdown of what each entity should pay. So the nice thing now is a program that historically would cost $440,000 costs Otay roughly $217,000. So it costs roughly half the amount that they would pay originally for this type of program. And so what it does is it gives water utilities the money they have for water conservation. Now they can do a lot more conservation because they have money coming in from an outside entity who is also benefiting from the water utility conserving water. So this is one of the projects that we were hopeful or considering to develop down here in Mexico. And right now the idea is that we focus on the city of Monterrey for a study like this. And there's a lot of other kind of complexities that you can add to this, but this is kind of the basic concept. The other kind of area that I wanted to share with you is estimating agricultural groundwater withdrawals from energy data. And why this is so important is when you look at groundwater models, one of the pieces of information that's critical to a groundwater model is how much water is withdrawn from the ground. And it's oftentimes, in a perfect world, we have water flow meters on all the extraction points, and we'd be able to measure that and then report it and share it with others. Most times, people don't like to have water meters on their wells. So this piece of information is oftentimes lacking within groundwater models. But there is a way to estimate this fairly accurately. And the idea, and this is an equation we developed, it's existed for a while, it's called the efficiency lift method. But you can estimate the amount of water withdrawn from the ground with these inputs, these 4 inputs. So it's the energy use of the pump, it's the efficiency of the pump, there's a conversion factor, and then the total dynamic head associated with the pump. And this is the same equation, it just breaks down total dynamic head into its components. So the components are the depth from the ground surface to groundwater, the drawdown of the well, so once the well starts to pump, it tends to create a cone of depression, and then any sort of additional pressure or frictional losses as the water leaves the ground and goes through the pipes out to where it gets ultimately deposited. So again, this was a very long and detailed study, but we use this method with, there's a variety of data sources that you can use to obtain these numbers here. And so we ran a series of 7 scenarios right here. And these are all the sources of data that we use. So we had a lot of different sources of data and we mixed and matched them. So again, the words aren't important, but we had a number of different sources. We mixed and matched them to create 7 scenarios. And we worked in a region in California where they had flow meters on the agricultural pumps, and that's very uncommon. So we had an actual estimate of water flow, and then we had a predicted estimate of water flow using electricity data and the efficiency lift method. And then we wanted to compare the two to see how accurate they were. And so we compared them on 2 bases. One was we looked at how accurate they were on a monthly basis. So for monthly estimates of all the inputs that go into the efficiency lift method and the estimate of water flow. how closely did those compare? And I know there's a lot of information here, but the main thing to focus on is this IOU hourly data. So this energy data came from the energy utility itself. And so we have the ability in California through different types of laws and policies where people like me can go and request from the energy utility their energy bills without their permission. And there's a lot of restrictions that are placed on me in terms of what I can do with that. So we obtain the energy bills from the energy provider. And then we put in the estimates of the other parameters and calculated how well does this method compare to this one. And so you can see, there's quite a range here. Certainly this one's this one's the best, 12%. And 12% might sound like a lot, but when your basis of comparison is no data versus data that gets you within 12%, that's not a bad estimate. And then we looked at it one other way, which is let's take all these numbers that we need and let's average them together into an annual average. And we looked at the data the same way. And again, just focus on this one. But as you look across here, the errors associated with this method versus this one begin to lessen because you're beginning to average a lot of the errors together associated with the two methods. So a method that estimates groundwater extraction within 5% is a very good method. So we now are planning on using this method to integrate into groundwater models in California to begin to make estimates of how much groundwater is withdrawn. And through that process, we will begin to do land use planning of what needs to happen on top of the aquifer to ensure that that aquifer is not overdrafted over a long period of time. So land use planning means you can have agriculture, you can have industry, you can have commercial, but what mix of those should you have over that aquifer to ensure that that aquifer will be present in your children's lifetime, basically. And so this is another concept that we like to explore and kind of bring down to Mexico in the Monterrey area. Remember, the four kind of areas I just wanted to highlight. So the third area is opportunities for water, energy, and efficiency in agriculture. So there's quite a diversity of water and energy efficiency, or what I could say is water and energy use efficiency in California, and from what I gather, there's quite a diversity down in Mexico as well. And the basic idea is if you can obtain actionable intelligence or information on what different growers or farmers are doing, you can help the ones that are not very efficient become more efficient, and the ones that are very efficient you can help promote and advertise as being really good stewards of the environment. So we recently completed a study that involved roughly 7 farms. There was row crops like onions and lettuce. We had a cattle ranch, but that one dropped out. We had berry farms, and then one that's not shown here is we had a couple wineries. And we went in and we obtained estimates of energy and water use. And shown here is a graphical representation. So berry grower, berry grower, berry grower, and berry grower, and berry grower. So there's 5 berry growers. And these numbers, so this is a low energy intensity. Energy intensity is how much energy is used to produce an acre foot or a certain volume of water. So yellow's low, red's high. So if you compare these 5, you can see that there's diversity across different berry growers. And that diversity of energy use might be warranted, but it might not be. So it at least gives you a tool now to go in and say, well, this berry grower and this berry grower might need some help to make their pumps more efficient or to make their operations more energy efficient. And the idea is then you can identify those growers, you can go in and understand what they're doing, and then if they need help, you can then formulate plans of what they need to do to make their farms or growing operations more energy efficient. Shown here is row crop and row crop. There's 2 row crops, but again, you can see some diversity in how energy is used within row cropping or irrigation of row crops. And then we have 2 wineries down here, and again, there's quite a bit of variation there. And I don't have a slide just for the sake of time, but remember that energy is linked to water, so we could translate this very easily into water use. We'd end up with the same types of plots, and we can use that then to go in and interact with growers and farmers to understand how they're using water and what they might do or what kind of practices they might do to make their water use more efficient. So that's another project we're working on, and we hope to bring that down here, the concept, and ideally kind of marry it with the groundwater modeling piece. So now that you can estimate how much water is withdrawn from the ground, you can get a sense of what's taking place on the land. You can then go in and actually help people become better stewards of water and energy who need help, and then promote the ones that are doing well as good examples for others to follow. And the final piece here to end with, and this is a little bit longer, but I thought it might be a little more interesting for all of you as college students. So the final project that we've been working on related to this area is trying to take these concepts I've described to you and downscale it to a residential house. And so some people like to use the words on-site or decentralized, but it's like, can we take these concepts that we apply to communities or to regions, and can we extend them down to a much smaller scale, basically the scale at which you and I live? And so this project was actually a 2-year project, and it was a student competition that was sponsored by the U.S. Department of Energy, and it's called the Solar Decathlon. And in the Solar Decathlon, I have a series of slides here to show you, but students design, build, and then operate a zero net energy residential house. So you go through all the steps of doing that. And then along the way, students have the opportunity to add in different elements that they view as being important to them. So I should say, we don't get snow in Davis. So the house was designed and built at the University of California, Davis, and then it was transported to the competition site, and this year it happened to be in Denver, Colorado. So this is the house set up in Denver, Colorado, and they had a freak snowstorm when the competition was going on. So this is just a snapshot of some of the students that worked on the project. So there was, this year, so generally 16 different colleges or 16 different universities compete, and it's international. So Monterrey Tech could send a team if they chose to. This time they had a team from Sweden come and one other international team come. It's an international competition. This year we had 16 teams arrive. Generally there's 20. And we had, so this competition, while it's designing and building a house, it draws students from a whole range of disciplines. And there's all sorts of activities that these students can apply their expertise to. So this is just a bulleted list of the different expertise. But chemical engineering, civil engineering, you come down here, you get communications, design, human ecology, landscape architecture. So it attracts students from a whole range of disciplines, and they all have an opportunity to apply their different skill sets to this particular design problem. It's a 2-year project, and in total we touched the lives of about 250 students, which is quite a lot. So over a 2-year period, roughly 250 students participated. So all the design work was done in a series of classes. We offered 6 classes over a 2-year period, and the bulk of the design work occurred over a 1-year period. In addition to the competition goal of designing a zero net energy house, students can also then decide, other elements that they want to add. So this student team was very interested in designing a house that had very little water use. And so their goal was to reduce the water use of this house by half of what of a normal house in California would use. And I'll talk about how they did that here in a minute. They also were very interested in having the house be educational. So as you, not only as you tour the house, but as you live in the house will teach you something about what you're doing in the house and how to become better at what you're doing. So I gave you an example of farmers and how we can then identify growers that have high energy use or high water use. They wanted to take this idea and bring it into the house and have the house teach the occupants of the house how to be better stewards of energy and water. And I'll show you some ways they did that. And then the final thing is they wanted the house to be inclusive, and they defined that in 2 ways. They wanted it to be ADA compliant, ADA is American for Disability Act, so they wanted it accessible to people with disabilities. And they also wanted the house to be modular. And I'll show you pictures here in a minute, but the idea of modular is the house was small. It was about 930 square feet. And they wanted it to be modular so that you could reprogram the house. So your kitchen can turn into a dance room, or your living room can turn into a dining room. And so while it's a small house, it can have a lot of functionality, or functionality of a much bigger house. They weren't able to fit a bowling alley into it, but they got a lot of other functionality into the house. So the students took the house from conceptual design to design development. And then they ultimately worked out in detailed design and produced a set of plans and specifications that in concept you can hand off to a contractor to build the house. But instead of handing it off to the contractor to build the house, then the students moved from the classroom out into the field and they began the construction process. And so I don't want to speak for all of you, but I will speak for the students that participated on this project. So when you move into the field and you say, okay, here's a hammer, a drill, and a tape measure, the vast majority of students would ask questions like, how do you read a tape measure? How do you use a drill? And it's actually, and I don't say that to be critical of them, but it's part of the educational process that you never think about in the classroom. You all, I'm assuming most of you are in like a design profession of some type. You all learn how to design, but many of you don't, or at least I'll just, again, talk from my university, we don't teach students actually how to build the thing they design. And I contend you have to understand how to build to be a better designer. So this was so we don't have this built into our curriculum. This was the only opportunity students had to learn these skills. So I just have some photos of the construction process happening. The house, because it had to be transported, was built on 2 very large trailers. And I want to emphasize they're not modular or mobile homes. They were actual houses built to housing standards. And the intent is, once they ended up in their final resting place, that they would be slid off the trailers and put on a fixed foundation. But here you're going to see them on trailers. So these are all students doing different activities. Outside the house, this is the inside of the house. This is part of the modularity here I'll talk about in a second. This is a video, Anyway, this is a time-lapse video showing the house go up, but it's not working, but that's okay. Oh, it is working. So now this construction process took about a year and involved, about 150 students, not all of whom are working at once, but they would come and go. And this was all offered as part of a 3-course sequence teaching students how to build something. So you'll notice now that solar panels are up on the top of the roof. There's a white roof that's part of the energy efficiency measures that were put into the house. White roofs help reflect the heat so it doesn't go into the house. There's a couple other energy efficiency measures I'll talk about. Are there any structural engineers in the room? No? Okay. You have one? Maybe? So just to run through some of the features. So the structural elements, I think the main point here is these are panels. The students didn't build these. They're panels that then you erect. So they're built somewhere else and then you put them up. So it's a very easy process for unskilled labor to use in order to build something, because you don't have to, you basically just erect things and put them together. This is made out of bamboo, which in California is considered a sustainable material. And you'll notice a big gap between the walls. This is the exterior and this is the interior. That gap at some point was filled with insulation that has a very high R value, or a very high, it doesn't allow a lot of heat to leave the house. Water efficiency, so I think probably a lot of us are interested in water. So the big features here, it had a gray water system. So it was dual plumbed, so it separated black water, which comes from the toilet, from gray water, which comes from all other sources. And it took the gray water, and there's a treatment process, and then some of these tanks were used to store the gray water, and then some of the tanks were used to store rainwater. So it had rainwater storage. One of the neatest things I thought they came up with was, this idea of being educational. So they had behavioral indicators that taught the residents of the house whether or not you're using appropriate amounts of water. So they found a shower head. So this is the shower head, and it doesn't make the water blue, but what it does is it makes the water look blue with light. And the water goes from blue to yellow to red. And when it gets to red, it means it's time for you to get out of the shower. They also created, and they actually built this. They didn't buy this. But they created this display, and what it is a series of a bunch of LED lights. So here's a few lit up here. And every day when you start your day, you come out, and these lights were where there was a faucet. So there was one in the bathroom and one in the kitchen. And every day when you start your day, the screen is full of lights. And that's your water budget for that sink. That's the amount of water you can use. And as you start using water, the lights go away. And when all the lights go away, the budget for that sink is done for the day. Now, it doesn't mean the water shuts off. It's just teaching you the appropriate way to use water within the house. And they had a couple other educational features, but those are two I wanted to highlight. And then finally, I thought this was really neat too, was this idea of landscape and what they did. And this brought in, people from landscape architecture, but they landscaped the entire house with plants that used the same amount of water annually as what was produced with gray water. So what they did was they essentially eliminated the need to irrigate your outdoor landscape with potable water, but you could still have a very nice, lush landscape. So your yard looks like it's not cactus and rocks, but effectively you don't have to use any potable water to irrigate your outdoor landscape. So it eliminates all outdoor landscaping water. Energy efficiency, so I'll just run through this quick, but the house had 27 solar panels which generated enough electricity to power the house. We had, as part of this, we put in a battery so that not only could we generate electricity, but we could manage when we pulled electricity from the grid and when we pulled electricity from the battery. So we can manage then the time of use that the house used electricity from the grid. So it was grid tied, and it's zero net energy, which means over the course of a year it uses zero energy. But sometimes it pulls from the grid, sometimes it doesn't. But the battery helped manage that. We had an efficient heating system, a cooling system. The heating cooling system was a radiant floor system. You put a bunch of pipes in the floor, and then you run hot or cold water through, and that then radiates up and makes your house hot or cold. And we had really good insulation, and we had really good windows. So these are just some photos of the house. So this is the living room, and you'll get a bit of sense as I click through this. But it was a small house, 935 square feet. It's probably maybe the size of this room right here, excluding the back part. Had 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and they decided, the designers decided to have a rustic, modern feel to it, and you'll see what that you'll get a sense of that. Well, you can see here, rustic is the wood, the modern is kind of the open air, the paint and the vaulted ceilings. We have a lot of bikes in Davis, so they incorporated a bike theme. So this is outside the house, and this is the entryway into the house. These bikes, someone donated. They're made out of bamboo. They're supposed to be sustainable bikes because they have a low carbon footprint. It's outside the house. This is all at the competition site, not on the UCD campus. So this is inside the house. So this is looking from the living room into the kitchen. And the students actually use the house while in the competition. So they cook in it. They don't live in it, but they cook in it. They drive electric cars. They charge the electric cars, things like that. This is this is the kitchen and the living room. And so to get a sense of the modularity, this is a table. You can fold it down like these are. You can fold these up. So you can have a big table. This is kind of a table on wheels that you can use as part of your kitchen area, or you can move it out and you can turn it into a dining room table. Under here are seats that you can roll around. They have storage areas in it. So this is all the kind of elements they put in to create the modularity. So you can have a big dinner party. You can then put your table back down, and you can have kids play in the living room. There's places to store things. This is the kitchen or the bathroom area. This is one of the bedrooms. And then these are just a few more photos. This is the back side of the house. They had a big deck to expand the living area to the outside. So once they built the house, they designed the house, built the house on the UCD campus, they took it to the competition site in Denver, Colorado. These are all the 16 teams that arrived. This is not our team, this is the 16 teams. So this is how we did. And shown here, so the Solar Decathlon has 10 different competitions. These are the 10 different competitions: architecture, market potential, engineering, communications, and so on. And this is how we scored in each of these different competitions. And you'll notice that this one right down here, we scored really low in. And so we would have done really well, except we scored really poorly here. And I put the big red button. And so just as a kind of an aside, I thought it was funny, but we got the house to the site, and the local building inspector came out and said, because you have a battery in your house, you need to have a big red button that you can push that disconnects the battery in case there's a fire. And that makes sense. And so if the firefighters go up in your house and cut through your roof, put out a fire, they want to make sure that there's no electricity in the house, and the battery is kind of dangerous. They can kill the power with an electrical panel, but you can't kill the battery. So they wanted to put a big red button. We didn't have a big red button, so we had one installed locally, and they didn't install it right, so they destroyed our whole electrical system. So essentially all our solar panels and battery and everything else didn't work. So if that hadn't have happened, we would have done a lot better. But these are all the teams that showed up. This is our team. This is how we scored, so we didn't place very well. But you'll notice if the energy competition right here, if we had actually done how we thought, we would have scored pretty well. I mean, we would come in the top 3. So it's the big red button's fault. And I just want to show you, just the final example is, this is the house that won. It was designed by a team from Switzerland. And this is their team. They had really neat uniforms that they wore all the time, unlike any other team. They were very organized. This is literally their house. Okay, the inside. You'll notice something really strikingly different right away, which is 2 stories. Okay, remember, they designed and built this house in Switzerland, deconstructed it, put it in shipping containers, shipped it all the way over to the United States, trucked it to Denver, Colorado, then took it out of the shipping containers with cranes and built it. So it's a very different building style than what we did. We just put ours on a trailer and drove it there. But this is their house. So I'm just going to show you some photos. So they had an aquaponics system underneath that treated their gray water with fish. They were growing plants in it. There's a lot of things here I'm not showing you. But it was a phenomenal house. But it's also, you know, in a competition led like this, it's at least from my view, it's about what students can do with the money you can generate. And so our students didn't have that skill set to create something like this, but we still created something that was really unique. And the amount of money that we could generate was a lot, but it was not enough to create something like this. And I think probably the thing that I think was I was most proud about with this effort was after the competition was over, about 6 months later, we got nominated and won then we won an excellence in structural engineering by the California Structural Engineering Association. So it's the trade organization for our state, the trade organization for all structural engineers, and they recognize this house as being very, very unique and innovative as it relates to structural engineering. So it's a real testament, it's an outside testament of how well these students did to win, you know, a statewide competition it's not related to students, it's all about working professionals. So they competed against high-rise buildings in Los Angeles, redesigns of libraries in San Francisco, and they came out and won that competition. So I thought I was very, very proud of them. So that's it. I'll end there. But I'd be happy to follow up with any of you. I mean, I look forward to coming back down and spending more time in Monterrey and interacting with students as well as research. So thank you all for coming today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Loge, for this interesting presentation. We have a couple of minutes for questions. you want to participate.
Doctor, very nice presentation. We are glad that you came and gave it to us. The question is, for the gray water, does it have any treatment before using it for gardening?
Yeah, so there is treatment of the gray water before it is put into, before it's put onto plants. And so there's regulatory requirements that we have to meet within the state, but basically the water is, this is engineering talk now, but it's coagulated, oxidized, and disinfected. In a treatment system the students built, it goes into the storage tanks, and then as the plant needs water, it's pumped from the storage tanks to the plants. So it was an on-site treatment system. So again, this is all about on-site renewable energy, on-site water, or on-site energy, on-site water, and then ultimately on-site kind of water reclamation reuse. Yeah, so the question, I don't think the microphone's working. So the question was, how much did the house cost? So the students also were very focused on affordability, and that wasn't shown in the slides I showed you, but that was kind of a reoccurring theme. So to answer your question, let me put it in context. So new construction of homes in California, not accounting for the cost of the land, is around $400 to $500 a square foot. And this house was about $150 a square foot. So relative to the building, current building stock, this was a very affordable home. Yeah.
Can you repeat how did the battery work, like the one underneath the house?
So the battery was about as wide, or about this wide, and it was about as tall as me, and it was about this wide as well. So it was a very large battery. And the way the battery worked is electricity from the solar panels would go into the battery. And the battery then would make a decision of whether or not to power the house with what's in the battery, or to power the house with electricity that's pulled from the grid. So the battery was programmed with a computer, and we told it the times of the day to pull electricity from the grid and the times of the day to pull electricity from the battery. So it had a control system in it, but we basically told the control system what to do.
Thanks.
I just wanted to clarify, so did each team have a different budget, like considering in the competition?
Yeah, so while the competition is sponsored by the U.S. Department of Energy, so an entity, they give each team no money. So each team then can develop whatever budget they want, but it's up to them to raise that money. So we had to raise about $750,000 US dollars, but that doesn't mean our house cost $750,000, because there's lots of expenses we have to pay, like computers for students. We have to pay the airline travel and a hotel room and food for 30 days at the competition. So there's all these expenses associated with the competition and the project as a whole that don't reflect what it costs for the house. So we had to pay that. The Swiss team, my guess is they probably had to raise about $5 million US dollars to compete. And that'd be for the house, and then the transport of the house, plus the transport of all of them from Switzerland to the US. And it could have even been more than $5 million. So these are not cheap efforts to do. But just to follow up is, there's been some talk, or I've heard there's some interest here at your university of doing something similar. You can do something similar, but not be part of a competition. And if you do that, the cost would be considerably less. And in fact, much of the cost is materials, and my experience has been, you can get a lot of the materials donated from different companies.
Hello. My question is, which activities are related to communication?
about the project.
Oh, yeah, which activities were related to communication? So I did not talk about those at all, but that's a very good question. So there's a tremendous amount of communication that takes place with this effort. So students have to create a website and populate the website with information. They have to have Twitter and Instagram feeds and populate those on a regular basis, not daily, but usually every couple days to a week. They had to develop they had to write basically a communication plan that outlines all the unique elements of the house. They provided that in written form to the judges. They also then created a communication plan for when the house was at the competition site, because it's open to the public and you have to give verbal tours. They created all the signage around the house. And I'm sure I'm missing some other elements, but there was a lot of communication.
Do you have a team for that specific activity?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had a whole communication team that just dealt with communications.
Thank you.
And they were very busy.
Sure, for sure.
Questions. I want to thank Frank for this presentation. And finally, finalmente quiero, como parte de del professorship que estamos iniciando, existe la posibilidad de hacer intercambios con la Universidad de California, de tal manera que los invitamos, si tienen interés en trabajar en alguno de estos proyectos, que se acerquen con nosotros y tratar de ligarnos con alguno de los proyectos que estamos trabajando con la Universidad de Delhi. Muchas gracias por la atención. Thank you very much.
Thank you.